We've been walking around half of the Colosseum for the entire video. Now let me show you why. This is the Flavian Amphitheater or the Colosseum, one of the greatest marvels of the ancient world. But if you look around, you'll notice it's not whole. The southern half is gone. So the question is, what happened to it? Who destroyed it? When did it happen? Where did all the stone go? Why was half saved while the other half vanished? And how did this monument survive at all? Well, you can see for yourself that it was not an easy life. The first trouble came in 180 AD when a catastrophic fire ripped through the wooden upper tiers of seating, destroying about a third of the structure. Repairs were rushed and shoddy, and the patches are still visible on the north side. 2 decades later, in the middle of the 2nd century, earthquakes began to batter Rome. The worst struck in 238, killing over 10,000 people. Although no major damage was reported, cracks must have appeared in the masonry. By the end of the century, another quake cracked the Colosseum. This time repairs were delayed for 5 years. The masonry was reinforced with concrete, which you can see along the top of the external wall. That delay might have seemed like an eternity to the Romans of the day, but it was nothing compared to the long sleep that lay ahead. In the 3rd century, the Roman Empire entered a period of instability. The great emperors of the 1st century were gone, replaced by rulers with shorter lifespans and weaker claims to power. To make matters worse, the empire was increasingly short of money. Rome was a victim of its own success. Trade flourished throughout the Mediterranean, but the spoils were reaped by distant merchants and landowners rather than the treasury. By the turn of the century, the state was unable to fund the lavish spectacles that had become the norm. Exotic animals were harder to acquire, and gladiators, the stars of the games, were too expensive to train and maintain. Still, the shows went on for nearly another 2 centuries. In 320, a Christian bishop named Donatus wrote that the spectacle of blood moved the crowds as wine moves the inebriate. These games had become a drug. They were all the more alarming because the condemned and the condemned hunted each other for sport. By the late 4th century, the times had changed. With Christianity ascendant and the empire on the decline, the Senate grew reluctant to spend. Finally, in 403, the games were abolished. A few beast hunts continued, even outliving the Western Roman Empire, but they were never the same. The Colosseum had been a symbol of Rome's power and wealth, a propaganda tool for the emperors. But as the city fell into decay, so did its monuments. The next blow was delivered by nature. Earthquakes continued to shake Rome, but the damage was slight. The real danger came from within. The Colosseum stood on 2 different levels, the northern side resting on solid bedrock, while the southern side was built on waterlogged soil. Over time, these different foundations moved at different speeds, causing the structure to warp and crack. Add to that centuries of arsonists and stonemasons, and the result was inevitable. In 1349, the entire southern outer wall collapsed, perhaps in a single mighty quake, or perhaps gradually over time. Either way, the ruin gaped open, forming what has become known as the Colossus Thigh. To understand what happened next, you need to know who was living in medieval Rome. The population had shrunk to under 10,000, mostly poor farmers and artisans. There was a shortage of housing, and the Colosseum, with its sturdy if fractured walls, was an obvious solution. Families cleared rubble, erected partitions, built chimneys, and planted gardens. Animals grazed in the arena, laundry hung from the arches, and children played among the ruins. We don't know exactly when this occurred, but it must have happened quickly. In 1361, a writer described the Colosseum as being, quote, so ruined that no one could enter without a torch, implying that there were no intact exterior walls left. This created a unique cityscape. One writer described the interior as being, quote, more like a country village than a Roman monument. Church authorities tried to evict the squatters several times, but they were always successful. People needed shelter, and the Colosseum offered sturdy if precarious walls. It was difficult to clear the area because of another problem. By the late Middle Ages, the Colosseum was owned by multiple parties: a church, a hospital, 3 monasteries, a duke, and various private citizens. This complicated web of land ownership made eviction almost impossible. It wasn't until the 1800s that Rome was reunited and the Colosseum was declared a national monument. The site was excavated and the neighborhood dismantled. Most of the stone was hauled away to build new churches, palaces, and government buildings, including the Mausoleum of Hadrian, Piazza Venezia, and the facade of the Basilica of Santa Maria in Aracoeli. If you visit the Colosseum today, remember that you're seeing half of a ruin that was once a ruin itself. The southern half was lost to earthquakes, unstable ground, centuries of stone robbing, and the ambitions of Renaissance builders. Only the north side remains because it was less damaged, faced the papal palaces, and was protected from plunder. Thanks for joining me on this extraordinary journey through the heart of Rome. Do you know any obscure historical facts about the Colosseum? Share them below. And don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic explorations of history's greatest mysteries. See you next time.